a bit of a recap, maybe we'll come on to your question. I understood maybe you were facing some issue while executing the application, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, so 10th December was the last day when we were together. Mostly what we were focusing on was the database. So what we understood is any of the project that we work from a CAP perspective, one thing we should be quite clear about is CAP is nothing but one another way of generating an OData service. Okay, it has got many capabilities definitely, but in a nutshell, if you see the outcome, the output that it provides is nothing but an OData service that ultimately can be consumed on a different areas. Okay, wherever we need. Now, while doing that, there are two aspects of any of the service, one being the DB and one being the actual endpoint, or I can say service of it. Okay. So currently we were focusing on this DB. Now, what we understood is each of the application has got its own set of a kind of, you can think of a repository or something, which can ultimately be served as a container onto which all your database artifact will be lying. So for example, we were looking at this project which says I have a DB module over here. I have got few things. So when I say I am trying to create an entity, what the system will create is a table on top of it, right? And that particular table uh, should be something that I can expect to be available onto database. Same goes for employee, same goes for department. When I say I'm trying to create a service endpoint, then definitely if it has got the reference from some of the underlying DB, this won't be containing the actual set of a data, rather it will be some sort of a view on top of that particular database table that already exists, so that this information can also be exposed. So for example, when you say we build this particular project, we got some generated artifact. In a way, when you look at it, you will find that the generated component also contains the thing which should be available onto DB. So for example, let's just go to the employee DB model. What it contains a namespace EMP APP. It contains employee. So theoretically, as I mentioned, it should create a table EMP underscore APP underscore employee HANA database table. Do you see it onto the list? I can say yeah, EMP APP employee. Now it dot is into the files convention, but if you just click on this, you will say the final table that will get created will be with the underscore. So ideally, whenever a entity has been converted into a database table, system always change your namespace into something which is a concatenation of the namespace plus your entity name, change underscore with a dot with the underscore, all the columns, generating a HANA database table. As HANA database table follow the column table convention, you will see a column table mentioned over here. For the other one, which is I can say department, you will also see same kind of a thing. For the thing that you have exposed as a service, for example, let's just think from an ABAP's perspective, right? I have a table created and think of a scenario where you used to have those reports, okay, not also those OData services and Fiori application. So when I say I have created a table, out of the table, I would like to give some sort of access to my, let's just say, rest of the world, saying I would like to expose all the 5 columns. I would to expose only 3 columns, and I would like to give some access on top of it, right? So what will I create? I'll create a view on top of it. In terms of OData, this particular tables ideally are when they are exposed in the form of a service, as its SAP underlying architecture is anyway going to be the same, they are also creating a view. What will be the naming convention? It will be nothing but your employee service underscore your employee. So as you can see, employee service, employees, and here you see HDB view. So they are also creating some sort of a HANA database view which is fetching the data from the table. And this is the thing that my end user will be viewing. My end user will never be knowing what are the things which I have defined on the data model. Instead, they'll always be communicating with my service, which I would have created, and that service expose the view. That's the reason you will always see like what used to happen in the earlier the SAP DD views, same sort of a terminology format are also following. following are also being followed when it comes to the generated component of a CAP service, right? So for example, here for same goes for the department, right? Now, on top of it, we have also said that, okay, we want the draft capability for this, right? And what is a draft? In technical term, what is a draft, right? So draft is nothing but some sort of an intermediate state of a data, right? So for those who would not have worked on a draft capability, let's just see. Okay, she's in. So for those who would not have worked on, let's just say, any of the application or working on draft capability earlier, let's just say, if I say draft capability, what it is, right? So for example, I am working on a document creation, be it any sort of business document creation. I have entered data in, let's just say, n number of column XYZ. I could have done n number of work, n number of meetings, n number of mail I would have gone through just to create that document. What should be the correct information which I have been asked to enter? In between, some power failure happens, or in between, let's just say there was something urgent that just came up and I have to rush to that particular place. In any case, if I do not click the button save over here, my final data that should have been persisted on my final HDB table would not be stored, and all the hard work which I would have done will be gone, right? So what SAP has came up with is there is a table which ideally contains your whole set of a data. On top of it, how would it be if I provide you another table which you can think of some sort of a draft table, and this particular draft table we will be using to store the data even without the user asking for it. So at some point in time, maybe I guess in a 5 seconds or a 20 seconds or some point in time, a backend call will be dispatching automatically without my user even knowing it. Okay. And the moment the backend call gets triggered, it will automatically pick the things those have been changed during that particular delta time duration. They will put this particular thing, for example, XYZ, into this draft table. Okay. Now you will keep on working tomorrow. You are saying this is not Y, I am changing it to YY. Your draft table will keep on getting updated. Okay. And you will see the things available over here, but your actual table does not have anything. But still on your application, you are able to see this information. Right. Now, tomorrow, what happens is whenever you are pretty sure that, okay, now I am ready to save my document, you click on save. The moment you click on save, definitely you are saying that now I am pretty sure that this document is something I would like to have on my database. System will simply create a copy of this into your HANA database table and delete this draft instance of it. So the dual storage that it has created will still be saved. It's just a table placement available to store the temporary state of a data, right? In between, this particular record will be saved, but the moment the actual record gets updated, the system will automatically push those things into the DB table and your draft table will be vacated. So if you are saying thinking from a perspective that my organization has to maintain dual table, they might have to pay dual costs for saying the same set of data. That's not going to happen because draft table at any point in time will not contain much record. It will only contain the record depending on the documents which are under process. Tomorrow, let's just say someone is coming over here and saying, hey, I would like to edit this document. What the system will do is it will just create a clone of it into this. Now you are saying, can I change this to ZZ? You will change it to ZZ. Now your user is seeing this information in a edited version, in the version which has not been saved yet. So your draft table will contain this information, and this information will be available till the time your user does not decide whether he want to save this information or discard. So it's quite possible, right? I just came over here saying I would like to change this, but then I decided, oh, I don't want to. I'll just be uh, keeping the things however they were. Okay, so the moment your user discard, this draft table entry will be deleted. But if you say, I would like to save this, system will ultimately again copy this information, update the actual version of it, and then delete the one which was into the draft. So while the document is being edited, the same document will have multiple versions. In order for the system to support while doing all this mechanism, what technically we might need some sort of a table which can store the draft information. So as you can see, it's employee service employee draft, which contains the information of the draft record, which contains certain draft relevant information, which says that whether my record is active or it's still in a draft. If that's in a draft, which is it has a draft, so does it have an active record as well? For example, if it's an edit scenario, it will have an active record, right? If it's not edit scenario, if it's a create, then in the draft table, it will not have a active record. So these are draft relevant information I can think of. Now, in order for this to also be uh, exposed to the end user, you will see that this particular thing has been exposed in the form of a some sort of a view. Okay, so these are nothing but my some sort of a view which contain draft relevant information, and this information are persisted and the communication will be made on top of it. So these are underlying architecture. We are not supposed to worry on that. You can just simply put this annotation, it will work, but it also makes sense for you to know how the things work, to be quite sure that okay, this is how the draft relevant functionality has been implemented. In case something is going wrong, you can easily pinpoint these other thing which might be going wrong. Okay, now as we were talking about the containers, right, what we understood is all these things will be stored into containers. So if I go over here, you would see that we had so-called a deployment thing called deployment artifact that we created by adding a cds add mta, which says, hey, if you are saying I would like to deploy, I'll create certain service which will serve the purpose of your application, right? So what you will do is you will see that the moment you create a deployment artifact, you will find certain thing getting created in the form of modules. Modules are going to be generated, I can say going to be converted in the form of some sort of a microservices. So you will have an individual service running in the name of a service. You will have an individual service running in the name of a HANA database deployer. This one will be served on the top of a Node.js layer. This is going to be served on top of a HANA database layer. It says that this particular DB deployer ideally requires a database container to work, and that's something that has been provided as a resource over here. Right now, when you say you have created a database container, consider that you have tried deployment for the one time, for example, and in the run configuration, maybe you are also able to see the things over here saying I have connected to this. Okay, so you should be able to see some sort of a green light over here saying, okay, now it has been bound, right? Now, after doing this, many a time what happens is the moment you say, hey, I would like to, as I have done this run configuration, I would like to see the information which are available over here. So what you might do is I'll simply say, if I just okay, if I just try to open my HANA Database Explorer from here, in case it asks me for the credential, I can have it. Okay, it's connecting to the DB Explorer session. Okay, so this is the one that got created. And if I just try to open this, I should be able to view my, I'll just close everything. Okay, and I'll just open the tables. And here I see my employee table over here. So I can see that, okay, the things are, there is one record available over here. Now, if I just go back, here I see that I have connected to the same database container, right? Now, if I would like to view this, there are two ways. Okay, when you are, okay, this is the thing maybe you might also face sometime. So when you are working on a non-HANA database, currently it's a HANA database, right? So when you are working on a non-HANA database, which has got a dev dependency of SQLite, initial DB will be working on SQLite. At that point in time, if you write CDS watch, you will see the things working. Here as well, you will see that as if your DB is working, but as you can see, here it has just simply connected to HANA, right? Now you remember when we connected to HANA, we required certain thing. For example, when I say I would like to connect to my HDA container like this, it says, can you please send me the admin password, schema name, user, and everything, right? And we copied it from some sort of a service binding. Reason being that this DB is quite secure, right? Anyone cannot access it whenever they want, right? So if I say this has been started just by using CDS watch without passing any credential, okay, what it will do is if you try to open this over here, if you try to open this in a preview, you will find this kind of error, no database credential provided. Because what are those credential it is looking for? It is looking for those credential that we applied in the form of a JSON, right? Applied in the form of a JSON over here. And that's something it is not finding. That's the reason it's failing. Now, what would be the straightforward way to tackle those? So I'll just close this. Rather, what I can also do is I'll just simply click on run configuration. I can click on run over here. Okay, the moment you click on run, the application will start getting executed in the debug mode. Okay, consider you would like to run that application in a real mode, not in a debug one, in a normal end user mode, but you would like to connect to the DB as well. What you can do is you can simply say CDS watch dash dash profile hybrid. It hybrid means that you are running it locally, but you still want to pretend as if you are not executing it locally, you are connected to the live DB. The moment you do that, you will see certain thing. It automatically tries to derive certain thing. It says connect DB to HANA. From the run configuration, it tries to derive your database ID, host ID, and everything. Now, this time, if you just try to open this particular service, if you try to preview this, you will see the record that was there available. I can simply click on go. I can, if I want, I can click on create. Whatever thing I just do over here, the same will start reflecting on my DB over here, and whatever is there onto the DB, you will see the same reflection onto your application's output. Okay, this is how we execute the real application with the live DB. If I would like to, let's just say debug many a time, right? So currently we don't have much Node.js code, so we won't be debugging. But if you would like to start the debugging mode, rather than writing any command, just click on this run configuration. After DB has been connected, just click on this play button over here. It says run application. This will run the application in a debug mode. As you can see, opening the debug view. So let's just say you would like to check how the things are working. You can see that. Plus here as well, if you view in the console, it's trying to connect to DB with the required HANA artifact connection. So system knows, okay, what are those certificates? What are those things? So your system will be able to connect that to the DB without you even asking, and you will be able to see those applications working pretty fine. So I can simply refresh this. I hope it would have connected to the real, I can say the same endpoint. 4004 was the port. Yeah, as you can see, even if it is in debug mode, I can see those things. I click on enter, and it says it triggers a read call over here, and it retrieves the set of a data. So that's also working. So this is how you ideally execute that. So the moment you connect to the HANA DB, the command change a bit. CDS watch will become CDS watch profile hybrid. Or if you would like to go with in a normal mode, if you don't have a debugger, definitely run configuration will anyway not stop your execution, right? So in that case, what you can do is you can simply go ahead and click on play button rather than worrying about any sort of a command or anything. Okay, now over to you, Ashok. I see you have raised your hand.
Yeah, I run CDS watch profile hybrid, but I got one error. Live reload enabled for browser. I got that. After that, command failed. CF fourth token command got failed. I am getting that error. The token is
Hmm.
expired, was revoked, or the token ID is incorrect. Please log back into the re-authenticate.
What do you think from a CF token? Let's see that. You remember we have got that error earlier. CF auth token missing.
Yes, yes, yes.
What
You
was the
reset
issue?
the password. You reset the password. I
No,
think.
no. Ultimately, my password was anyway. not working. That's the reason I reset my password. But why did I end up resetting my password? I mean, what I was trying to do, I was trying to log in somewhere, right? Have you
CF
logged
log.
into your
CF
Cloud
log.
Foundry?
Yeah, yeah. I forget that one.
Can
CF
you?
login.
You have to log in CF, do CF login. The moment you do CF login, maybe you enter your user ID and password. Once your Cloud Foundry is connected, then you will be able to, let's just say, execute. Otherwise, it will always say that your auth token not found because it's looking for that token always.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. I got it.
Okay. Okay. Maybe you can try it out. No worries.
Yeah.
Okay. Meanwhile, anyone else having any doubt on this concepts? Maybe Toshit, you had some doubts.
Uh,
Sorry, you're on mute again.
Yeah, sorry. I went through the recording yesterday. The
Mhm.
doubt what I was having is when you have tried the creating a table in a DB that I did not understood.
The HANA DB concept.
Yes, yes,
This CAP project, it's clear. Maybe the other concept that we did, right?
yes,
So that's
yes.
something we are anyway going to go through once. Okay, not an issue.
Okay. Mm.
Okay, so for this one, right? So now what we understood is that here the service was something that we tried deploying, but the certain things will failing. So maybe I guess what we'll do is, as we know that for my service to work, we'll need a database, we'll need an endpoint. In the last session, we focus on a DB in a way that I can have a single database container, or I can also have a project where I can create a central DB, okay, and that particular central database over here would like to connect to my central database would be providing the data or would become the data store for my two of the running CAP project, or I can say multiple running CAP projects. That sort of architecture I can also think of. Now, in order for that to work, there are certain concepts called synonyms. That's something that will come into picture, but we'll come on to that. Before that, let's just try to understand how I can make the things work. For example, currently I have a service over here. In this particular service, I have a database, I have an endpoint. Now, as we would have seen that when I say I would like to have my DB working, I would like to have my DB working. I deployed it and I was able to see my DB available over here. But when we tried deploying a service deployment failed because of some XYZ reason, right? It says that passport missing or something, correct? So what happens? Whenever we are saying I would like to deploy my service, there are a couple of things it ideally looks for. Okay, so in your empty environment, you see that, look at this thing deployed correctly. Now, the things that just got missed was the service, and that's the reason in your account, when you go into the overview, when you go into the okay, this particular application, you would see that this service had failed earlier while running. What was the reason for that? When we looked into it, maybe in the last session, it says some passport missing, right? Whenever we are saying we would like to deploy our service, what would be the purpose? So that it can be consumed by different set of a consumer. Now that consumer can be my Fury application, that consumer can also be some sort of a, for example, normal end users who would be connecting it via some sort of a API endpoint, can be any sort of a possibility. It can be anything, right? Now, if I would like to go with that, then in that particular case, what we might need is that this particular API endpoint and the Fury application is something that should work. Okay. Now, those all the things are quite secure. Okay, my endpoint service, like we said, my DB, you would have seen that no database credential provided because my DB is not open. It won't allow anyone to access it until and unless you don't pass the right credential. Same goes with the service. And this service authentication mechanism is ideally, I can say, secured by different different ways of securing CAP service, right? So in ABAP, what we used to have is we used to have some sort of a PFCG role, right? We used to have some PFCG role. You used to assign that OData service, and that particular OData service, whichever user has that particular role, we're able to access it. Plus, any of your OData service looks for your normal SAP login. So in that way, it was secure, right? Now, when it comes to CAP service, we would also need that it's a valid BTP end user. The required roles and everything which I think of should anyway be there, right? So all those things comes under a concept of, I can say, my so-called service authorization and authentication, right? Authorization and authentication. Now, what happens is, you would have heard that thing maybe when you were in college, that maybe when we used to generate any sort of a communication, some sort of a base networking concept come into picture. Now, networking concept always are not relevant to hardware, right? It also depends when a client and the server is trying to communicate to each other, right? My client will be nothing but my end user's application, be it let's just say Fiori or API or any sort of a consuming party. My server is nothing but the one who is serving that, right? Now, client may request for something, but server will not respond to each of the requests which my server is coming, client is coming up with. It will only respond to it if it finds that this particular request that I have got is quite valid, it's quite legit, okay, and the client is able to prove its identity. Okay, and those all the thing used to happen by so-called networking concept, where you used to have some sort of a combination of a private and public key, right? This private and public key used to be validated, right? And this particular validity will ensure that, okay, this particular user is a valid user, and I'll allow the access for that. So this all networking concept generates some sort of a hexadecimal key combination which are used for internal validation. I mean, these are gets generated automatically. We are not supposed to worry on that. But based on that, a certain token based authentication has been token based authentication mechanism has been set up into the system in specifically for CAP. Now, this token based authentication you will also heard in the form of some sort of a JWT token based authentication. There is a term which you ideally hear in CAP. You can also you might also heard the very famous term called XSUAA authentication. Okay, what we'll do is we'll try to go with current authentication mechanism. So for example, if I say that when I tried executing this, maybe over here, you would see that the using authentication, it says mocked. It means it has got some mock set of authentication which is working, right? So if I say CAP authentication, for example, it would have generated some sort of a mock user saying, okay, these are the user who are available while you are running it locally. When you are in a mock data, okay, this particular set of users will be helping you out with that. So as you can see, mocked authentication ideally has got some sort of a dummy users over here. These are anyway defined in the SAP CDS. You would have heard of LIs that has got some role. Bob is also having some role. Likewise, these are the roles which are defined, which is anyway used only during your local execution, nothing more than that. Now, in a real environment, when I would like to secure that, my security could be like I am saying that I would like a user to work, or I can say use my service only if he is valid, right? Now that validity is defined on different in different aspect. How I can say that my user is a valid? For now, it's a contextual question, right? For example, if I say uh, my user is valid, whether he's a valid user for my application, right? So I can have my application which can also define its own set of a valid user. My application might define own set of valid user and password, saying if you are passing this valid user and password, then I'll consider you as a valid. Anything else I won't consider. So I would like to define a very limited set of authentication thing, right? So then in that case, I can go with some sort of a basic authentication where my user will pass some sort of a user ID and password, which I would have defined onto application layer. Or I can also say that if my person is logging into BTP, generating a token, which will be passed to my service, and if my service find it valid, then I can consider it's a valid user, and that's called XSUAA based authentication. So in my application, I won't define anything, rather XSUAA based service will serve over here. So this is something we are going to come on to next, but let's just see this one. When we say the basic the authentication that we see over here is mocked. Okay, this all the user that we are looking for, this is what it contains, right? So if you would like to, for example, view what is the current set of authentication which is available, you can simply say CDS ENV. It says inspect the effective configuration. What is the current configuration which is available? You can run CDS ENV get inquiries in your project to figure out what is the current environment configuration setup which is available. So I'll just go back over here and I'll just run this. So as you can see, it just came up with answer saying there is a mock strategy of authentication where you have got this dummy users who are playing the role of it. So these are the user who are having a specific authorization, plus this particular star is the anything else who is having everything, each kind of authorization that you can think of, but it only works in local. Now let's just say I would like to change this way of authorization. Okay, I would like to go with basic. I'll simply say that, okay, there is a kind of a basic authorization I would like to go with. So you will simply add along with the CDS DB requires saying I would like to go with auth, and I'll simply say basic. As you can see, these are the possible authorization which are possible. Now, if I do that, I'll simply again re-execute the same command. And as you can see, it just came up with an answer saying now it's a again a kind of a mock user, because basic authorization is also kind of a mock user. But here the users are not something which has been provided by default. You will define your set of a user. Okay, this is something which is also not a productive way of doing those things, but it will at least enable you deploying your application for the very first time. Next, when we ideally are going to learn the XSUA based authentication, we'll learn all the concept of app routers, how the application can route your authentication mechanism and everything. But in a nutshell, your authentication mechanism that you specify over here, at one point in time, we are going to change this authentication mechanism from basic over here to XSUAA. Okay, and that's where your application will serve that particular purpose. Currently, I'm saying there is a basic user authentication I would like to go with. On top of it, what I would need is that what are the user. So here what you can see is there is also clause called user. So you can say my application can, or I can say my service can only be accessible if the user who are trying to use this, okay, the user who are trying to use this, for example, here you can specify any user ID and password. So for example, I'll just simply say um, my user ID. I'll provide a user ID, for example, admin. Okay, and here I'll provide a password, and I'll just simply say admin. Okay, in that case, what would happen is this particular user will be considered as a only valid user. Only with admin user and password you will be able to log in. So for example, now if I just try to get this authorization here, it's still not getting the users. Ideally, it should have. Okay, no worries. Ideally, it should have got the users over here. I guess that's the same thing. Kind users. Maybe it's not returning it anyway. That's fine. So ultimately, on top of the basic, we are saying that, okay, these are the basic set of users that we would like to have. That's all we are saying. Now let's just try to deploy a service, so which was failing earlier, but it failed with few more things, right? It says there are certain passport thing which just failed. So I have to add some package called npm install passport. This is something we found from the log, right? So whenever you are working on security, there are two required packages for that, a passport plus access security. These are the two important package that you always should be having in your application for your security mechanism to work. SAP Access Security. These are the two package you will always install by saying npm install. Now, after doing that, I'll just simply try to, anyway, if you would like to have another version of your MTF right? So MTF ideally is available over here, which contains some sort of a patch version. You can keep on increasing it. So for example, I can say 1.1.0 or 1.0.1, and next time I'll just simply try to build this, right? So if I just build this, it will generate an empty YML file, this time with 1.0.1. If you do not change this version, it will try to override this. Many a time you might also delete the file which you don't need. That's also one of the way you can go with. Okay, so let's just see that. Okay, and it just generated something. I'll just press enter, and here I'll try to deploy this. Okay, so your DB is anywhere there. Now it's trying to update your service. It's trying to deploy your DB. Next time, maybe it should also go with service. Okay, and BTP service, as you can see, has now got started, which was failing yes, maybe in the last session, right? It says your application has started and available at this particular location. Maybe I guess once the process finished, as you can see, it just successfully finished. I'll just go over here and I'll try to refresh this. It will show me the service. This time it should be in a running mode. Okay, now it's running mode. I'll just click on this. I'll get the URL for that. I'll click on this. Okay, now for example, I would like to view the metadata. It will ask me for some user ID and password. Which user ID and password will work over here? Not my actual one, but the one which I specified over here, because I am saying that my user ID and password will be nothing but this one. Okay, so this is what you are supposed to pass. So I'll just simply say admin, admin. Oh, what did just happen? It's not allowing me to. It's got change. Mhm. what's happening. Okay. This anyway should not be my user ID and password, which it should be looking for. Let me just try that out still. CDS requires kind basic. These are users, the user ID and the password. These are same structure. Okay. Let's see. We'll say my service is quite secure. I'll just simply say requires, I just need authenticated user, nothing more than that, or I can say nothing other than that. Let's close this. What's the issue with this? User admin not found. Okay, it's not finding the user at all. What has changed during this course in time? Okay. Amen. My bad. Okay, structure is something maybe I guess we just change. So this auth over here. Okay, maybe I guess there's something maybe we just missed a bit. There's a just the JSON structure which is wrong. So within this auth, we should have a kind. It's a JSON structure. System is not able to recognize the thing. Now it says basic over here. And now I should also get something called user over here, right? So there's something I'll just paste. Okay, now if I just try to also get those things which I was trying to get earlier. Yeah, now it found the admin user, right? Earlier it did not. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll just simply say CDS watch profile hybrid. So it's just a JSON structure. It's the auth should have the kind and then the user. Maybe I guess it was looking for some specific JSON structure. Maybe I guess the formatting was some bit incorrect. Okay, let me just click on this and I'll just simply say admin. Now it just got loaded, right? Now the same thing maybe we have over here. Now what did I added over here is when you don't have authenticated user right over here. In that case, even though you have done the basic authentication over here, your application won't still be considered as a secure. What you are saying is that for this particular service to be used, I need just a user who has proven his identity, who is authenticated. Other than that, I won't not like to allow anyone else. Okay, that's what you will do, and that's what we are passing over here is a kind of a cap specific keyword. You will always specify add that as an annotation and say requires authenticated user. You could have possibly specified that onto an entity as well. So for example, I would like to say that my this particular user who use employees entity should be authenticated user, but the one who ideally maintains the department should be an admin, right? So what you can do is you can also define a role with the name admin. So we are anyway going to discuss this when we go with a XSUA or token based authentication. Currently, we just understood, or I can say we are going through a basic authentication. The moment we go with XSUA, we'll also understand the roles. So for example, there can be a functional person, technical person, COE, field user. So how for all those, if I would like to define different kind of capabilities they can go ahead with, how we can do that. Okay, so I just did this. And now what I can do is I'll just simply clear this out and let's just try to deploy this. Anyway, these not that required. Maybe let's see, I guess if it allows us going with that, otherwise maybe we'll clean that up as well for now. I'll just simply clean up my other archive file. Reason is quite simple. We only got 4 GB of BAS storage. So if my uh, BAS is quite full, we are anyway going to understand the GitHub repository concept to avoid this cleaning of thing. But that's something maybe I guess we'll have maybe I guess in a next week, maybe I guess when we are going to learn that. Till the time, let's just see the size of the file. So empty archive contains the archive file, which is having the highest size. Next goes with the node modules, which also contains a good amount of space. So those are the things which we ideally consider cleaning it up in order for us to save some space in our business application studio. I'll press enter over here. And now if I just go over here, I'll try to deploy this. Let's see what it looks for. Mostly this should not have any impact, but if it looks for some sort of a bound excessive AS service, then it might fail, but let's see. Mostly if it's basic, it should not anyway complain. Okay, so we'll close this because anyway, we won't be able to log in. And maybe I guess when we are going with a concept called media attachment, at that point in time, we'll also understand how the postman can be used to use any of these services. Okay, because currently we are just having get call. Tomorrow, let's just say if you guys go with post call, postman will be required, and that postman will be used to connect to any of our endpoint. Okay, so that's something we'll be also learning. So for example, now if I click on this service, it will prompt me for user ID and password again. Click off a metadata. Now I'll pass admin, and now it just got loaded. Now here I can also go ahead and view, for example, data for my employee, and it just got me the data from the database which is connected to it. So this is the one record which is available. That's something we loaded in the database explorer. Same is appearing over here. And this is called basic authentication. Now, why we did this first and before even the completion of a database, so that you know end to end how the service is working with one kind of authentication. The full proof in the production environment, you will have this. This is something we are anyway going to learn. Are we all clear with this kind of authentication strategy and how strict cap is about it?
Yes, Sumit.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Sumit, do we need to hard code username and password everything, or like you hard coded
Uh,
admin
s-
username and
so
password, right? How it
uh,
in the
so
production?
so in the production, that's what I mentioned, right? So basic authentication is something which is not mostly being used in the case of a production. If you just also go over here, if you just click on this, basic authentication is also considered as some sort of a mock authentication.
Okay.
In a real world, you won't have a basic authentication. Rather, you will have a authentication called XSUA. Now, what it will do is, like when for example, if when you are clicking on a launchpad link, if you have already done a login, none of your applications endpoint ask you for a login until and unless it's connected to a different system. So
Yeah.
those authentication token keeps on being passed upon with the concept called single sign-on, and those are being done with this particular key combination. Some sort of token is available in your browser cache, which is ultimately being passed upon, and that's how it is working. This is
Mhm.
the thing that we are going to learn, which needs a bit more basics, which we should also be aware of. But I just help you understand the basic authentication. So our service is up. Plus, whenever you are doing any sort of a development, your application is very much into the beginning stage, setting up the roles, who all are going to be your users, what all kind of roles you will need, defining all those things beforehand may not be possible. But still, you would like to do a unit testing of your application. You would like to deploy it, the first version of it. Then what you will do is you will go with basic authentication and you will define a set of dummy user, some admin, some XYZ, and you will define, for example, I can specify the some sort of a role they can have to check, okay, if it's this user, this is how it is working. Afterward, once your application is ready, you will anyway, before delivering any service, you will never deliver it with the basic authentication. Rather, you will deliver it with always with the XSUA based authentication in the world of a CAP. Okay, so this is not going something which is you are going to deliver. It's just for the development environment. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sumit.
Now, please.
Sumit. One question I have. Like, due to V2 and V4, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like our metadata loading in JSON, right, at browser
Mm-hmm.
level.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we can change into XML because if
Yeah, those
for
are
like,
those are
yeah,
those are all
uh,
URI formats, right? So, for example, if I say I have, for example, here consider these a V2, right? Now, in this one, I say I would like to get some sort of a employee data
yes,
over
yes,
here. Now I am getting some data over here, but I would
yes,
like
yes.
to convert it into JSON format. So I might say question mark dollar
To
format
format
equal to XML, right?
XML. Okay.
Uh, Entity collection, maybe I guess this URI may not, I might have messed up with the URI, but all those conversion, anything that you are talking about, all those things ideally work. Missing format representation for entity collection.
Yeah, I have tried. That's why I'm asking.
So
Like,
these the
I was,
these the error, these the error that you are getting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was changing and I have followed Google also,
Uh-huh.
but like data is coming into JSON only. So that's why I'm
Mm.
asking. Like,
Okay. No, ideally all the URI convention, because this is on the underlying OData layer. We
mhm.
ideally does not have any influence on that. But let's see if is this the same issue that you are getting in V4?
Yes, yes, yes.
Hmm. Let's see, maybe I guess then this should be a known issue, because ideally we should
Yeah,
be able to
we can
convert
change the
everything
format. Okay. Mm-hmm.
always. Yeah, maybe there is something missing. Ideally we should be, maybe I'll just have a look and maybe we'll come back on to this, because this is just for a
Okay.
usability
Okay.
perspective. When the consuming application is using that anyway, it will always work with the JSON set of a data. But point is this, all the URI thing, anyway, your filter short and all the dollar URI format, all of them are working out of the box. You are not supposed to do any single line of code for that. That's anywhere there, but why this format did not work, that's something I'm also a bit surprised. I'll check and we'll come back to it. Okay. Okay. So now coming back to the thing that we started in the last session. Okay. So we created DB, our service is up and running with a basic authentication. Now, what we understood is that in case I would like to create some sort of a DB, which is a central one, central DB, and I would like my, let's just say, some sort of a CAP user, or I can say CAP project to use this data. So consider a simplest scenario, right? I'll just simply say my employee is there, which I am trying to create. Okay, I am trying to create my employee. I have my CAP project for that, and which is having an underlying DB container for that. Now, if I do that, if I say I have a CAP project, I have an employee DB container over here, then in that case, this cap projects container, for example, called HDI underscore cap EMP will contain all the data. So tomorrow, let's just say if I'm creating another cap project which says that employee dashboard, right? So if this particular project over here has got another container saying HDI cap, let's just say EMP dashboard. Now this dashboard will contain an employee table or a view which will not have any data, right? I would have created, let's just say 1,000 employees over here by creating, or I can say by enrolling by any which way. But this particular DB container will be empty because it is connected to a new container, a fresh container, which does not contain any sort of a data. Rather than that, what if I would have created some sort of a data storage, some sort of a data container, I can say some sort of a central data container, right? Which is going to be, for example, HDI CAP central DB container. And here I would have stored those employee, right? Those 1,000 employee. Then what would happen is that if I have one application which would have some container over here and it is internally connected to this, so the moment my CAP application try to post some data into this, it's going to post those into this DB container. Tomorrow I would like to I would like to create employee dashboard over here. So what I'll do is each CAP application will have its dedicated container, but I can internally connect to this container over here. This central DB container will contain the thousand record which would have got posted via my first service, via my first application. And I can create a very nice dashboard on top of it. So I can reuse the data which would have been posted via my first service, and I can use it very well in the second service as well. Okay, so in order for us to have this clear picture, in order for us to view how this thing work into action, what we did is we created some sort of a DB. So I'll just close this, or I can say I'll just simply go in my dev space homepage. Okay, and we have created another dev space basic HANA DB. Here we created certain things. So I'll just simply stop this, because unfortunately in a trial account you can have only one space running at a time. I'll start this as well. Okay, so this particular let's just say folder contains a DB container which is a central DB. Now consider one thing, this is a local dev space. Whatever things which are going to get deployed, you will see it over here, right? So this is the thing that we just developed into the last session. We created some table over here, BTP employees, which contains some sort of an employee. Okay, and I created a view which will give me a access for this particular one. And on top of it, we created certain rules. Now, why all those things are required? That's something which we are going to learn today when we actually will feel a need of it while consuming the central container into this. Okay, let's just first go through the way my old, I can say central DB has been defined, because I think we should also be very clear about the structure of that particular centralized database container. Because what you are currently able to see is that it does not contain the things into the CAP terminology. The architecture, the language that we have used, it's quite HANA specific, right? And that's what a HANA DB will always contain. Okay, so I'll just simply go ahead and open this project. So maybe this is what we had created earlier, right? So what we did, we created a new project from template. We choose a SAP HANA DB, and here, if you visualize it clearly, then what you would be seeing is when you create a CAP project, when you try to build it, it generates some component in the gen src db, right? So this src folder ideally will contain all your HANA artifact, and there as well, right? In the CAP project, the artifact that those get generated are in the form of some sort of a HDB table, some sort of a view. These are the things that you ideally see in the convention. So in a nutshell, when you are going to, these are a kind of a thumb rule. When you are going to define some sort of a central HANA DB, you won't go with a CAP project because CAP project comes along with a service, which anyway you don't need when you are creating a central DB. Rather, you will need a module which is just capable of generating a database. I just need a module. I just need a project which is just capable of generating a database module, not a service module, right? Because I just need a reusable database. So I just created a table. Now, if you see the format of this is quite similar to what is also getting generated when we created a CAP project, right? So it's a column table. We gave this name. And what we also thought is that when I am creating an application, right? Application can be of different use. My employee application is there, which whose purpose is to manage the application, manage the employee, to create an employee, to change, update, delete, anything. But my dashboard is just to generate some sort of a dashboard out of it, be it maybe in the form of a table, be it in the form of a chart, anything, right? But it's just a view only, read only application. So based on the kind of application I am having, I can define the use, or I can say the kind of usage I'll have on the set of a data. What is the activity I'm going to perform on that, right? For that, what we decided is that the table that we have created, for the security purposes, we won't directly give anyone access to the table. Rather than that, let's just create a view. So we created a view which is simply selecting all the data over here, which is simply selecting all the data and from the particular table, and we are getting it in the form of a view. Afterwards, when you define anything over here, if I am willing to consume anything on my another application layer, I cannot simply give the name of my let's just say uh, database table, and maybe I guess what uniquely identify my application, maybe the schema, and I can expect that okay, it will start working. No, it won't. In order for anyone to use the set of data, they'll need the access. Okay. If I am saying that okay, I have created a new table, and I do not want anyone to be able to use this data, I won't expose it. But if I would like anyone to consume or connect to this particular table, do some operations on top of it, then I have to define what all kind of capability I would like to provide. And there comes the roles. So these roles are meant for providing the access to my set of information. So it's like I am having my own secrets, right? I do not want to reveal it to anyone, but let's just say my best friend. So what I'll do is I only share my information with him. I have set of information in my life, but I won't share it other than with the person with whom I'm quite comfortable with, right? I can have my, let's just say, property. I would have created my legacy, but I would like to share it only with my family members, or I can say my children or anyone. So I would be the person who would be deciding what all kind of capability I would like to give and whom I would like to hand it over to, right? And what I'm doing is I'm an owner of this container. So I have got the power, I have got the authority to decide what all kind of access I would like to give to the world outside to any of the information, be it data or be it anything. So here I created a write role. If I open it with the text editor, here you would see that we created an editor saying these are having a write role. And when I say write, what all things they can do? They can do a insert, SQL execution, update, delete, and select. Other than that, if there are certain things, they cannot do it. If I would like to restrict, no one should be able to delete that. If I remove this delete from the world outside, no one will be able to ever execute a delete SQL. The moment they do it, it will fail. Okay. If there is a dashboard application, right, what kind of role I'll provide it to them? I'll only provide the role which is going to be this read only role, nothing more than that. Because I know dashboard application should not be triggering a create call, right? If they are doing that, I should restrict them. So in their application, while binding it to them, I'll just specify the read only role. That's why the read only roles are also defined. Each of the application, you will see this kind of roles which are being defined. Now the question is how I can consume this thing. That's something we are going to come on to next. But I guess anyone having any doubt on the structure of this application, or I can say purpose of this project? Okay. So since we are clear, now let's just see when we are saying consuming this thing into another, how we can do that. Okay, so now there are a couple of things that we'll need and couple of things which we are also able to see over here. So for example, I am saying I have this particular container HDI BTP DB employee, which is nothing but this particular container that we created. I can see a schema. So if you open any of its component, for example, the table or a view, I can see a schema over here. It's also quite evident. But the thing that you won't see over here is a role. Roles are never available publicly onto any of the thing or onto any of the deployed artifact. Only the project code base will be knowing it. Or I can say the person who develop will be able to provide it to you, not anyone else. Okay. So for example, I am trying to create an application. I would like to view, or I can say consume the data of some sort of accounting information, some sort of a finance information. I have to reach out to that person saying, hey, I would like to use this information. Do you have any tables or views which I can use? If yes, what are the roles? Can you give me the name, exact name of the roles and the kind of privilege which I'll get? Okay, so that's something will depend on always. So what I'll do is I'll simply let's just say copy this from here. Okay, or I can say, yeah, let's just copy this one only. Is the right role. Another one maybe we have is some sort of right width. We have added just a hash. So we also discussed that whenever I am saying that I am giving some authority, whether that person whom I am given authority, is he capable of passing on that authority to someone? Let's just take a simple example. I have a bike and I am giving that bike to someone. I'm going out station and I'm saying maybe you can use that bike. Then I am giving him a right access. He can ride that bike. But can he give that bike to someone else? That's something I can provide with the grant access. And that's something we ideally specify by specifying privileges with grant option. And the naming convention of it should always have a hash in the end. You can try removing this hash, it will get deployed, but the moment you try consuming this, you will always see that that's failing. Or even privilege with grant option, the moment you specify, it will always point out to your convention saying this hash is missing, because that's a convention that is needed in the role name. Okay. Now, what we'll do is, so this is the component that we have anyway provided the access for BTP V employee. I would like to consume this. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply go ahead and now go in my CAP application, which I was using. Okay, and now I have to do one more thing one more time. I'll just stop this, start this. In the real project, you won't have this headache because you can have multiple containers running at the same point in multiple dev spaces running at the same point in time. Okay, let's see, it's getting started. Okay, I have this dev space running. I'll just open this. Okay, now we would like to use this. Okay, use this another container. What are the steps for that? Let's just understand. When I say I would like to consume this particular view, which is not part of this container, but part of other container into my project. Okay. As we mentioned, we'll need some sort of a role. Before that, I have to plug this particular container into mine. I have to plug another container into my project container. Okay. So what I might do is I can simply say I will go in empty YML and I have to define that this container which I am using, right? This is a central container of my application. So whenever you are doing any communication with my CAP project, he is the responsible guy. That's something I have to define. In order for us to do that, you have to specify some sort of a property, some sort of a unique identity you might have to give. So what you will do is you will simply say, I'll add one more property. So this is a resource which has a name, type, parameter. You will add something called properties to it. Now remember, this is a empty YML file, which is quite sensitive to any of the space, any of the tab that you provide. Okay. So if you are writing something which is not the indentation of which is not correct, your application won't be able to build it. It will keep on giving you error. Your application will fail during the build and deployment. Okay, that's something we should be quite aware of. Now, in order for us to do those things in a neat or clean way, I'll just simply right click over here. You can simply say open with, and you can open the empty editor as well. That will give you an advantage, saying you will get an input box, pass the data, and your code will keep on getting generated into the background. As it's quite sensitive to space or a tab, because many a time we might just to do the things in a right indentation way, we might keep on using space rather than tab or vice versa, and that might ultimately help, let's just say, give you some sort of a trouble. I guess once you are anyway comfortable with that, you can easily use empty YML text editor, because I am quite comfortable with text editor over the let's just say wizard base. But uh, when I started, I always used to use this wizard base editor. So let's just go with that. So what we are supposed to do is, look, now one thing is clear. I have got a container, so I'll simply say that my container is a main container. This is the definition I would like to define first. Second, this resource section says that this is a container which is the only resource which my application needs for execution, which is not going to be the fact, right? Now I am going to get one more container available, which I will need in order for my application to work. I am going to get one more container which is going to provide me this data. So this is going to be resource for my application, right? So first thing, let's just go over here, and here in the properties section, you see here in whatever thing we have defined are in the parameters section. I'll go in the properties section over here, and here you can define some sort of a key using which your container can be identified uniquely. So I'll just simply say HDI container name, and this name can be anything, but this variable, once you have defined, you have to use the same one. Okay, I'll just simply say HDI container name, and there are certain I can say uh, system variable. You can use those with the help of a dollar. You can say dollar, and whatever is the current name of your DB service, there is the name that I would like to give. Okay, once after you do that, if you just try to open this with a text editor, you would see that okay, it just created something like this. Okay, with the right indentation and everything. I'll close this. Now, another thing that we might need is that once you have defined this, you have to specify that this is going to be the target container, as in whatever things which I perform. If I perform insert, update, delete, what is your only single point of contact? Okay, you will say this is the container which is my single point of contact. Even though there are 5 containers, my this container will always be responsible for that communication, but my main target container will be this one. That's what you are supposed to specify. Where you can specify that? You can specify that in the DB module of yours. Okay, so I'll just simply go over here in SRV, and there is a DB deployer, right? And this DB module, in the properties of yours over here, you have to specify something called target container, right? You will simply say this is my target container. Okay, these are target containers that you are specifying. When you are referring to a variable which has been defined in a resource section, you will always use a tilde. In case of using a system, when we were using a dollar, here we are using a tilde. And ultimately what you are going to define over here is the key parameter that you specified. I'll just simply say HDI container name. Okay, this is what you specified. Now, if I just open this with a text editor, what you will find is that, okay, this HDA container name that I had specified over here has now been available over here. Okay, what did just happen? It's giving some red. Properties, target container. No, it's the right one. Let's see, maybe I guess there is something. Okay, in my DB module, I have specified the target container. That's all I. Okay, let's just do this. Okay, anyway, we'll see. Was generated, we'll keep this. This is the only convention I guess we do have. I'm not sure why this still HDA container property is not provided. Why? HDA container name property is there, right? There is the one which I see over here, which has been provided, but it says it's not provided. Never mind. Maybe I guess that could be something. Maybe we'll see. Now, after doing this, what we will need is, these are step one, saying you have specified that your container is the container that you will need in order for you to work on this. Okay. Now, on top of it, another thing that you will need is, I can say, hey, one sec. Okay, it's okay. It's doing that because the record. Okay. So this particular container is a property of this. Okay, one sec. Let me just open the empty editor. The indentation is incorrect. That's the main thing. This should have anyway appeared over here within this. So the property HDA container name has been defined into this one, right? Now we are specifying into this one, which is not recognized. The indentation is incorrect, but why is that incorrect? That's something maybe we can see. I'll just simply go over here. DB deployer, this one. Yeah, here. Okay, so that's the main issue. So ultimately what happens is this particular one, this should not be over here. I'll just copy this over here, and this particular DB containers property is this. So there is also a properties section. I'll just copy this and I'll just copy this and I'll paste it over here. I'll delete this one. Okay, now if I just save this, now you see the indentation has changed. For this one, the container name over here is this one. So my BTP EMP has got a property and I'm trying to use that property over here. Now I don't see any error. So this is what we should be doing. That's one. Now, like we have one resource which says that you have got one resource which is nothing but your own container. I'll need one more resource which is nothing but a container, this HDI BTP DB EMP, BTP DB employee. This is something that you are willing to use, right? You are willing to use this particular container over here so that you can consume any of the data that you need for that. Okay, how we can do that? For that, simply what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to define one more resource. I'll just simply go over here in the resource. I'll just simply say plus, right? And what you will do is you can give any name. Okay, so for example, I would like to access some sort of a cross container data for my employee. Okay, and I'll simply say that, okay, the service which I'm trying to consume is an existing service. Okay, so you will simply search for org Cloud Foundry existing service, because your service is on Cloud Foundry and that exists. That's what we are trying to say. Okay, and now you are going to say that, okay, the thing that I'll need is nothing but a name of the service. In order for you to identify that, I'll just say service name and what it is going to be. So I'll just simply open the properties over here and I'll just copy this. So you will say that, okay, there is a name of the service which I would like to target. Plus, anyone who is willing to use that, I can give any variable name. So for example, this time give the name as a the service name. Okay, and here you will ultimately get that whatever service name that has been provided, which is nothing but this one, I would like to use this. Okay. What it did, it just generated one more resource over here saying cross container employee. This one has got a service over here, and this particular service over here uh, is going to be used with the name called the service name. This is the variable that I am going to use whenever I would like to use this particular information. So I defined one resource, but has this resource been used anywhere? No, right? So this is the only place, but whereas if I consider this one, this resource is being used at multiple places. Now I would like to consume this resource. So what I'll do is I'll just simply consume this resource as well. Okay. I'll just simply go in the modules in my DB. There is one resource. It says my DB to work, it requires a database container. On top of it, for this DB to work, it also requires another resource. So what is that resource? I'll click on plus, and here if I just go in the drop down, I'll see the another resource which says cross container employee. Yeah, I'll need that. Whenever you are going to use another container, the group of that particular usage should be service replacements. Okay, this is what you will specify, service replacement. These must. If you don't do that, your system won't be able to figure out you are trying to use an existing container in your application. Okay, now once after doing that, we also should be quite uh, aware that what we are using, or I can say what we are planning to use, is a set of container, and it might have set of roles. So we might define something on my database module. Now this is one container. I can have tomorrow, let's just say n number of different containers. How will I specify what are the roles which this container requires and what are the roles which another container requires, right? In order for us to identify that uniquely, we have to specify something called a key parameter over here, and you can give any name to it. Okay, so for example, I'll just simply say my employee DB. Okay, so you can say this is my employee DB key, and the value of this particular service which is going to come from the variable that we defined earlier, the service name. This is what we ideally specified, right? I'll just save this, and now you see that this particular container which was not being used is now being used over here. Group is service replacement. I have defined something arbitrary over here into the key, which never exists anywhere. And the variable over here, the service name, is nothing but the one which I define on the resource specification. After doing this, what happens is your two containers can communicate. In a way, I can say this container can access something from here. But in order for it also to access, we might need some sort of a roles and everything. Okay, but in order for us to be quite sure, okay, the connection and everything work, what we can simply do is you can try building and deploying this. If the deployment pass, your data container is able to do that, it means the connection works. Afterward, we'll go on the object level. In order for me to access any of the object, I have to connect to the parent of it. So the parent is nothing but a container. So I connected to the container, I connected to my existing service DB container. Now my next target should be, I should be pinpointing to the view which I would like to use. In order for me to do that, I'll do certain activity on my DB, but just to understand the things in a better shape, just to ensure that the things are in a better shape, let's just try to build and deploy this once. Once it's deployed, we'll proceed with the next step. I'll just simply delete this one just to ensure that the space is available. I'll just simply build this, and maybe we'll, once that this is deployed, we'll go with the consumption of the view in the next step. Meanwhile, anyone having any doubt in the steps or what are we actually doing, why this service replacement and everything will be required? Anyone having any doubt into this, maybe please feel free to speak up. And the same step you will repeat for any of the consumption. Okay, so for example, if I say these are kind of an application that we are learning tomorrow, let's just say you are using 50 different data sources for your application to work. This is how you will ideally consume that. Okay, so you are anyway supposed to follow all this step whenever needed. Oh man. Okay, maybe I guess we'll come on to that. That's also something which is a very famous issue. We'll have a discussion on to that as well. Okay, so these are one step maybe we perform. We might also would like to go with the next. So the as there is a free tier, after some point in time, maybe I guess it might ask me for some sort of a cleanup before I deploy something because I have got a limited quota. Okay, we'll come on to that. Before that, let's just try to complete this particular topic that we started. Okay, so we'll deploy everything mostly into the last at last. Okay, so I'll just simply go over here and I can simply open the terminal. Okay, once after having this, what my next step should be? My next step over here should be nothing but uh, connecting my individual view that I had over here, connecting my individual view that I had over here, so that I can consume that in my service. I'll simply, what I'll do is I'll simply go over here and I'll in the SRC of it, okay, any of such a consumption uh, component that you are going to use or anything. If you see this hidden file.hda config, if I open this, you will see any sort of a HANA database component, be it a view, table, collection, procedure, synonym, anything that you create, you have to always create in the SRC folder because it these are the plugin that it needs in order for it to understand. Okay, what are those components for? I'll just simply right click and I'll try to create some sort of a folder, and here maybe I can simply say I would like to create some sort of a synonym. You can name it as anything, but why I am calling it as a synonyms, because as you can see in terms of HANA, these are called synonyms. So whatever remote component that you connect over here are ideally called as a synonyms over here. Okay, and this synonym are nothing but a component. Those are pointers to the remote DB artifact. Okay, so this is where we can expect those things to start appearing. Okay, now what I'll do is in this particular one synonyms, I'll create certain files. Okay, and this particular files extension should be nothing but your synonym. So I'll simply say right click over here. I'll create a new file. For example, I'm trying to connect something from my central employee. And I'll just simply say HDB synonym. Okay, it won't have S, it is just HDB synonym. I'll just say enter. If your file convention is correct, you will see a wizard getting opened. So as you can see, a wizard is getting open, but better than that, in order for us to understand it, we'll go with the text editor. But the surety is that your convention is correct. That's the main idea we are trying to get over here. What you can do is you can simply say control space over here. It will add this normal structure. It will say what is the component that you would like to create here. Okay, so what happens? You can have that particular remote component over here, which will come into the target. Okay, now in order for me to identify anything uniquely, what I'll do is I'll simply say I might need the object which I am willing to consume. So I'll just simply say this is the object. This is the thing that I'm willing to consume. Okay, plus this particular object also needs a unique identity that you can get via maybe I guess It's not giving it in a value help. It should be called schema. So this combination is always going to be unique. In a schema, I can have a view. Okay, so this schema is something that you are also supposed to specify. Now, what would happen is this particular component will be connected and will be available in your data container with the name called synonym name, right? It could have been more meaningful as well, right? I could have said rather than synonym name, I can say my employees. I could have done that, correct? Or rather than doing this way as well, I could have done in a more neat and clean way. What it could be? Simply, for example, if I say my another components over here which were generated, DB, Jan, DB, node modules, SRC, Jan, and here if you see the convention of any of the component, it says EMP underscore APP underscore employee. This is my namespace. This is the name which I'm using. So if I want, I can also use some name which says that EMP, I mean with the same namespace, EMP APP, and maybe I can say central employees, for example. Okay, now the advantage of this is EMP APP central employees, which I am using over here, is that this is the name it will create an object with. So maybe I guess once it's deployed in the synonym, you should be able to view the component with this name. Plus another one is this is just a view, right? This is just a kind of a synonym that you are creating, but I would like to expose this as an endpoint to my service. Okay, what are the ways which I have got? Then in that particular case, here you can create an entity, and you remember we were discussing something called something exists. If I do not specify anything on top of entity, it will create a table, right? But if I can provide those data source by some means, if I can provide those data source by some way saying this component exists, then system won't create it. That's the main idea. So here what I'll do is I'll just simply say this central employees. If I would like anyone to connect to this, then I might end up creating some entity over here. That's something we are going to do. We'll discuss that. But another, so these are component which I just named it. In the another container, this was named as this one, but here in my application, this is how it will be recognized as. This will be recognized with the name as EMP APP central employees. Now, as I mentioned, anyone cannot use it, right? So if I blindly start using this, it will give me an error for sure. In order for me to avoid those errors, in order for me to actually able to use this, I have to specify some sort of a roles. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply create one more file. I'll create a new file over here called, let's just say central. Now, this name of the file can also be anything. I'm just keeping it same. So you will be able to connect saying, okay, this is a name of synonym and this might be the related role. But there are no hard and fast rule that the name of the file should be same. Okay, I'll just say HDB grants. Grants is nothing but for the roles. Okay, now here in this one, you will specify some role structure. I'll just simply say add the base grant structure. It will ask you for two kind of a grant structure. One, the object owner, and one the application of the one of the application user. Now, what should be the granting service name? This granting service name is nothing but the arbitrary key. You remember you defined employee DB, because I can have 5 different containers which I would have connected to. How would I know which containers roles are there? So if you see this particular container which we created as a resource, this resource that we created, we gave a key to this. This key is going to play the role which says that, okay, for this container, these are going to be the role. So I'll just copy this and I'll pass it over here. Now there are two kind of role it contains. One contains object owner and one contain application user. Okay. Wherever the thumb rule is, whenever you specify any role in object owner, it means that, okay, one object is a table which is being exposed in the form of a view, which is being exposed, or I can say being consumed in a procedure. XYZ number of linkage can be there. In order for you to use, I can say them effectively, object owner should always contain the role with the grant privileges. because table needs to pass those access to view in order for the view to use the remote data. Same for the procedure and going forward, whichever chain gets generated. So in the object owner, whatever container role you will ideally specify, container roles that you will be specifying should be with the grant privilege. So what was the name of that grant privilege role? This was the one. So I'll just copy this. Okay, I'll just copy this and I'll pass it on over here. Another one is I might need one more container role over here for my application user, whoever is using that. Here I have to provide just the normal one, because my application user will only access the thing which I have exposed to him, nothing more than that. But my object might internally start using certain thing. So always this is going to be the structure of your grant file as well. It will have granting service, which is nothing but your key parameter that you would have specified along with the service replacement, plus your object owner and application user roles contained in a container roles. Here you will specify the roles with the grant privilege, and here you will specify the role with the without grant privilege. Now, as I'm specifying a role with a grant privilege or without, but these are with the right access, this application will be able to perform some sort of a CRUD operation if required onto this. If I would not have specified that, then in that particular case, this particular operation would not be possible. If I specify just a read only, then only read only operation can only be specified, or I can say processed onto that particular data, which is coming from this particular employee DB connected container, which is nothing but this HDI DB, which has been used over here. So this view can only perform the operations which you have specified over here. These how all the things are connected to. Okay, so this is how we ideally connect the synonym. We'll see how we can use and maybe expose them as well. That's something maybe which is a next story. Are we all clear till now? Okay, so after connecting this, let's see if we can maybe I guess not in a full deployment, but rather if you can deploy this individually. Mostly this might also fail, but let's just still try to go with that. I'll just simply say CDS deploy to HANA. So rather than deploying a full service, if you are only willing to work with your just um, database module of yours, you can simply go ahead and try CDS deploy to HANA. But earlier, if I remember, this BS was only capable of doing those things if you do have local data. If you are going with a remote container, it was still failing. But let's say, I guess if those has been resolved and maybe those has been upgraded. So maybe I guess we'll wait for a minute. Let's see if that works out. And do we have a HANA DB instance up and running? That's one of the important thing. Anytime you are willing to use your project, just check where HANA container is up and running, because in trial account, they ideally keep on shutting it down maybe after some time of inactivity. So here they have considered this. Yeah, this one, as you can see. As our MTA is not built and deployed yet, it's failing. Okay, maybe I guess it will fail for some time. Maybe I guess we'll have to anyway connect these dots. Maybe no worries in the session that follows. That's fine. But okay, so these are the steps we connected to this. Now, how are we going to expose this till the endpoint? Okay, maybe that's at least we can understand those concepts while we will be deploying it. Maybe I guess in the session that follows, we will be able to view those in the action as well. So what we just did, we just connected a remote resource. We created a separate container. We consumed it over here as a cross container. We use it as a service replacement. We can see it over here. In order for us to consume that, we specified the synonym. We named it something. Okay, why we named it like this? That's something we are also going to discuss. We provided the role that it needs in order for it to be consumed. Now, when we say we have ultimately consumed this with the name EMP APP Central Employee. And my next expectation is that I would like to expose this thing as a service endpoint. How can I do that? Okay. Now let's just say I am trying to create an entity over here, a normal entity. Okay, I'm trying to create an entity, and let's just say I'm trying to give the name of it as a central employees. Correct. The moment I do that, what the system might do is, if I build this, it might create a new table with the name called EMP underscore APP underscore central employees. Correct. This is the name that it might try to create an entity with. But as we can see, we have already provided a database artifact with the same name over here. So should the system be doing that thing? Should the system create anything new for that? Or it should just connect to the existing component that exists, right? So if we do not, if you don't want any of the new tables to be generated, rather we would like to have the, let's just say, things which are already available in the form of a synonyms to be connected while creating an entity and the service endpoint for that, what we'll do is we'll simply say CDS persistence exist. The moment you do that, my system will understand that this component that you are trying to mention over here that exists somewhere. Now system will try to figure that out, okay, how and where that exists. That can exist maybe in the form of some sort of a synonym, or there can be HANA database view you would have created where you might be thinking or you might be seeing that existing. Okay. So what we are saying over here is we are saying this particular component that I'm trying to access, whose name will be nothing but EMP APP central employees, this exists somewhere. Okay. Now, as we are saying that this exists, what all columns I can specify over here? Definitely nothing more than that, nothing more than the one which we have created, right? So if I just go into this database explorer, I can see that this view over here has got name, email ID, department, correct? Plus these are 4 columns, those are also available. So in total, these 8 columns are there. Other than that, if I specify, for example, phone number with the exist, system will fail because it says if you are saying something exists and if you are just trying to create a entry point for that, if you are just trying to create an image for that, definitely you cannot add anything more than what it contains, right? So what we'll do is we'll simply say I would like to have this name, email, department. I guess those are the one which we specified over here with 255 characters or 255, 255 and 30, right? So if I just specify it over here, right, and maybe another column. So it's not necessary for you to always specify the column 1 to 1 like this. If you have some aspects, some reusable component, you can also use that. That's also fine. So I can simply go ahead and use it like this. Okay, so what I'm saying is that this component exists somewhere, and that somewhere is something that you are providing by the means of a synonym. Okay, and after doing this, as you can see, this particular component has been created. If you would like to just create it as a normal one without any annotation, keep it plain and simple, you can do that as well. But this time, the moment you say, please build this, system won't create any of the component by its own because you already mentioned that this exists. System is not going to attempt creation of this component any longer. Now, once it has been done, what you will do is you might be interested in exposing as a service. So what you will do is you will simply go over here and simply go over here and simply say that I would like to expose this entity, and I'll simply say employee, maybe I can say central employee as select from EA dot maybe central employees. Now what you got by doing this is you created some sort of a endpoint which internally will connect to your central employee, which internally will connect to your database component which exists, which internally will connect to your synonym, and this synonym will connect to the component, or I can say data which has been placed in the centralized container. Okay, so this is how modularized, or I can say how reusable the things can be. Okay. Anyone having any doubt on the concept of this centralized DB container we were talking about? Because now consider that tomorrow you are going to create another project over here and you are going to use the same container, all you are supposed to do is you are supposed to add that particular new container, or I can say the same container in a different service as a resource, and define the relevant role. For example, next application, I might create a dashboard. I'll just simply say read only role. So going forward, whatever data which would have been placed thanks to the service endpoint, which would have created certain entries, you will see the same data into the another service because we are pointing to the same container rather than creating our own. Make sense? Yes, no.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Toshit, did it answer your question? Maybe I guess the one which you have pinged me into the chat
Yes,
earlier.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay, so I hope all of us are clear. Now I think we have got that particular, we have got into the trouble of that particular free tire. Maybe I have to do some sort of a cleanup activity. Okay, maybe I guess I'll let you guys know on to that as well, and maybe I guess we'll continue on to that. Before that, maybe I'll clean this things up. Is anyway going to fail this because of that particular free tire thing. Okay, we'll give it one more attempt, else maybe we'll fix that particular deployment issue of that particular trial and maybe we'll proceed. Let's see. Yeah, so maybe I guess I have to work a bit on this to make the things up and running again. Okay, so maybe I guess we'll discuss this in the session that follows, and maybe I guess during that maybe we'll have this deployed and maybe we'll see these things into action. Post which will also proceed. So maybe I guess in the next session, the main thing that we'll be seeing is that we understood how a table can be created, how a synonym can be connected. In next session, we'll see how a database views can be created and connected via entity, plus how we can connect to the Node.js layer of it by just creating some structure so that my underlying layer can be executed on a Node.js layer where I'll be writing my own set of custom code. Post which we are also going to understand how the, like we have an AMDP in ABAP, right? Same way we have a database procedures called stored procedures into HANA. So how those can also be connected over here. Okay, because that's something which will cover all your HANA concept. Post which we are going to jump onto the detailed things of CAP called attachment, or I can say media entities, how the validations and everything works. That's something we are going to plan. So maybe I guess we have to call it a day today, and maybe I guess we'll connect in the tomorrow session. Maybe I guess we'll deploy the service and maybe we'll proceed. Till the time, I'll ask you guys to actually have this setup ready on your system as well. Great. Okay, then I hope that's fine for all of us, all of you.
Yes, Sumit, actually, I'm having one doubt here.
Yeah, please tell me.
Doubt in the sense how the exact requirement looks like for this CAPM. Means if you compare with ABAP, we'll have some
Mhm,
report thing that these columns or these things needs to be displayed, or any T code maybe we can give.
mhm.
Like, I just want to understand how the requirement comes up here.
So how the requirement comes up here, it's quite, look, whenever a end user comes up with a requirement, they'll never specify the technology at the first point in time, correct? What you
Okay.
will see is, you will see, for example, I'll just give you an example of one of the requirement which I have worked on. So for example, my requirement was to create an application using which someone can maintain their meeting points. So for example, I'm a user who is having some sort of a discussion on some sort of a meetings, and I would like to generate a MOM for that. Right now, what I
Okay.
know is
Okay.
as I'm doing some sort of a MOM, am I supposed to connect to? let's just say my standard SAP HANA table, maybe I guess there will be quite less. Maybe I might need the project level information that I can anyway do by consuming my let's just say remote services, on-premise services and everything. That's something we are going to cover. But in a nutshell, you are going to develop something fresh which does not need much communication to the, let's just say, your on-premise world. Rather, you are going to develop something fresh. Plus, on top of it, your capability also requires you to consume certain third parties. So, for example, I was required to connect to my Outlook
Okay.
calendar. So my Outlook calendar can also be viewed over here, and or based on that, someone can note down meeting agenda. Now the same thing, if you are willing to do in your ABAP, it would be quite difficult because Outlooks and everything ideally are secured by graph APIs, which are provided by Microsoft, which are not that easy to consume via ABAP. So openness that
Okay.
it provides is so whenever a requirement comes, what you will weigh is that, okay, what is your current infrastructure? So for example, you will say I'm on BTP, then it means I have a capability of RAP and I have a capability of CAP. So if you're going with a RAP capability, what you will see is what are the features that they have requested. Does it needs a consumption of a third party APIs? If that's there, then CAP will become a good choice because the openness with it is connect to that third party API will be quite straightforward. With RAP, it's an ABAP layer, so that would be a bit difficult. Other than that, as you are on to CAP, as your on-premise system, for example, will be uh, generating something on RAP, which might have easy access of your standard business documents. But the usage of those standard business document, if that's quite minimal on your CAP application, that CAP becomes a good candidate because there you, if you need a small set of information, you can simply I can say connect to the backend system and create those calls. But if all your requirement is, for example, to create an application using which you can say manage good receipts, right? Using which what you are supposed to do is you are going to connect to your purchase order, trigger some sort of Amigo transaction. Everything is going to be processed onto your backend system itself. Then your rep becomes a good candidate because all you are trying to manipulate, all you are trying to work on is your standard S4 data, which may not be openly available because in your CAP, the things has been contained in the form of a containers, right? So
Okay.
depending on the use case, you will choose what are the things that you will go for. We'll have, I mean, as you ask, I just mentioned this, but maybe I guess we have a separate discussion on how to weigh the requirement and how to decide which technology will make a better choice. Because for that to understand, I mean, for you guys to understand that clearly, you might need certain capabilities of, you might need to understand the capabilities of CAP. So once after we have covered most of the capability that we need, we are going to have an open discussion of, let's just say, half an hour or so, where we'll decide, okay, for example, there is a problem statement. How will I decide whether I should go with a CAP or any other technology or another ways of application generation I do have? So we have this concept, but in a nutshell, or I can say in a base way, this is what we are ideally focusing on when you choose the requirement to go for. Because CAP and REP, many a time people consider it as a let's just say alternatives, but they are not alternatives. They are kind of complementing each other. So if I say I am trying to get some sort of a project information, saying for which particular project ID, SAP PS data, my rep can very well expose those data. If I am trying to create some sort of a business document, my rep can very well generate an API which I can consume in a CAP. So I can do those things internally, right? So those are also quite possible. So depending on what is the kind of work which your application has, I guess, in a broader side, and what is the capability, I guess, which of the capability is becoming handy in that particular direction, that ideally should answer your question whether you should go with a CAP, RAP, or even a normal on-premise report or whatever is your base requirement. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So we have a plan of, let's just say, connecting to third party on-premise system, and once we have connected to all of them, now post which we'll have this discussion again. So maybe I guess we'll have this again on the same note.
Okay. No problem.
Okay. Okay, then I hope we all are clear. Maybe we'll call it a day today, then maybe we'll see each other tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Sumit.
Bye bye.
Bye.